You finally got there. The job, the title, the income you wanted. You know the systems. You know the people. You know what matters. Mornings feel easier. Pressure feels lower. Work feels manageable. This is the phase most people spend their entire career chasing, and almost nobody tells you what it quietly costs you to stay here. Because comfort doesn't feel like a threat, it feels like a reward. It feels like you've earned the right to stop pushing so hard. You stop volunteering for the hard projects, and nobody says anything. You start protecting your energy, and that feels wise, not dangerous. But something is already happening beneath the surface, and you can't see it yet. Every workplace runs on two invisible lists that nobody announces out loud. The first list is who the company is building around. The second list is who the company is simply maintaining. You don't get told which list you're on. You drift onto one. And the moment you became fully comfortable, you started drifting toward the second. Here's what's actually happening inside every organization right now. Companies don't invest in people who have already stopped surprising them. Investment. Real investment flows toward people who create new problems to solve. The moment you're fully predictable, you stop generating that forward momentum. Your manager stops mentally filing you under potential and starts filing you under stable. Stable sounds good until you realize what stable actually means in a business context. Stable means known quantity, and known quantities don't get selected for what's next. They get selected to maintain what already exists, and that is a fundamentally different track. You are no longer being developed, you are being used. And the terrifying part is that this process is completely silent. Nobody schedules a meeting to tell you that you've been reclassified in their mind. Think about what happens physically when you stop challenging a muscle. It doesn't stay the same size, it shrinks, quietly, without warning you. Your career works the exact same way, and the timeline is just as invisible. When you stop solving new problems, your problem-solving range starts to narrow. You become exceptional at your current tasks and blind to everything just outside them. This is called the competence trap, and it has ended more careers than failure ever has. Because failure forces adaptation, comfort lets you believe nothing needs to adapt. You watch newer people come in uncertain, clumsy, making visible mistakes, and privately you feel confirmed you're clearly further ahead than they are. But you're watching the wrong measurement. They are building new neural pathways every single day just by being in discomfort. You are reinforcing pathways that already exist and calling it expertise. 3 years from now, they will have accumulated a range you stopped accumulating. And the gap won't be visible until someone has to make a decision about who goes further. This is the part nobody tells you. Comfort is not neutral. It's actively degenerative. Every week you stay comfortable without adding something new is a week of quiet erosion. And this is where it gets worse, because the erosion comes with a convincing cover story. The cover story is called experience, and it makes the trap nearly impossible to see from inside. Here is the system that is actually operating underneath your career right now. Organizations are not trying to keep you, they are trying to keep what you do. Those are two completely different things, and the difference is everything. What you do can be documented, handed off, trained into someone else, or automated. Who you are becoming, your range, your adaptability, your current growth edge cannot be copied. The moment you stop growing, your organization begins to unconsciously calculate a replacement cost. Not because they dislike you, but because they no longer see differentiated value in keeping you specifically. This is the moment you become interchangeable, and it is always triggered by comfort. Now here is the mechanism that almost nobody maps out clearly. When you were new, your uncertainty forced you to ask questions, build relationships, and absorb information. That process made you visible in a way that felt uncomfortable but was strategically invaluable. Discomfort was making you legible to decision makers. They could see you processing, adapting, reaching. Comfort made you invisible. Because invisible people don't create organizational narrative. An organizational narrative is what drives promotions, high visibility assignments, and strategic inclusion. Think about every person you've seen get fast-tracked inside a company. They were not always the most technically skilled person in the room, not even close. What they were was consistently associated with something new, something uncertain, something forward-moving. They were always just slightly outside their comfort zone, and that visibility compounded over time. Meanwhile, the most reliable, most competent, most comfortable person in the room stayed exactly where they were. Not punished, just quietly passed over, year after year, in ways that were never explained. This is not unfair. Exactly, it is the system working precisely as designed. The system rewards people who expand its capability, not people who maintain its current state. And the saddest part is that the comfortable person almost always sees themselves as a contributor. They are contributing, but they are contributing to a function, not to a future. The organization files them under operations. And operations is not where trajectories get built. This is the hidden engine of replaceability. Not poor performance, but arrested growth. But there's a layer underneath the career mechanics that is even more important to understand. When you stay comfortable long enough, your identity starts to reorganize around that comfort. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who grows and start thinking of yourself as someone who knows. Knowing is a fixed state, growing is a directional one, and direction is what creates forward momentum. You begin to subtly resist new challenges not because you're lazy, but because they threaten your identity. If you try something new and struggle, it contradicts the expert story you've been telling yourself. So the comfort zone starts to get defended, not just inhabited. You frame unfamiliar tasks as beneath you, outside your scope, or not worth your energy. You feel mildly threatened by people who are willing to do things you've decided not to attempt. And slowly, so slowly, you don't notice it happening, you become smaller than you were. Not in title, not in salary necessarily, but in range, in possibility, in trajectory. Here's what's actually happening at the psychological level when this occurs. Your brain, which is wired for efficiency, is aggressively pruning unused pathways. Skills you don't practice regularly get deprioritized, the neural real estate gets reassigned. This is not metaphor, this is measurable neurological change occurring in real time. Comfort isn't just a career problem, it's a cognitive one, and it compounds without any visible warning. The person you could have become 3 years ago is no longer available to you today. Not because you made a dramatic wrong choice, but because you made no choice at all. Stop for a moment, because this is the part that nobody in your professional life will say directly. The most dangerous career phase is not failure. It is moderate, sustained, comfortable success. Failure forces a reckoning. It demands that you reassess, rebuild, and re-engage with uncertainty. Moderate success lets you coast indefinitely, while the world around you quietly recalibrates. Industries shift, tools evolve, expectations expand, and the comfortable person falls behind without moving. You don't get left behind because you went backward, you get left behind because you stood still. And the cruelest part of this dynamic is that it feels like stability right up until it doesn't. One day, there's a restructuring, a new hire, a strategic shift, and suddenly your comfort feels fragile. Not because the world changed suddenly, but because the gap between you and it had been growing for years. The restructuring didn't create your replaceability, it just made it visible. It revealed the distance between where you were and where the organization had been moving without you. And that distance was built entirely out of comfortable days that felt completely reasonable at the time. This is what nobody maps out at the beginning of a stable career phase. Every day of comfort is either an investment in recovery or a withdrawal from future relevance, never neutral. The people who stay relevant don't work harder than you, they stay deliberately uncomfortable longer than you. That is the only real difference between a career that plateaus and a career that compounds. So here is the reframe that changes how you have to think about your career going forward. Growth is not something you pursue when you feel ready. You will rarely feel ready. Growth is something you pursue precisely because it feels uncomfortable and uncertain and slightly premature. The discomfort is not a signal that you're doing it wrong, it's a signal that you're actually doing it. Every time you volunteer for the project that scares you, you become harder to replace. Every time you learn something that makes you feel like a beginner again, your trajectory moves. Every time you speak up in the room where you feel least qualified, you build organizational narrative. Not because any single one of those moments is transformative, but because they compound invisibly. The same compounding that made comfort so dangerous makes deliberate discomfort extraordinarily powerful. And here is the final thing to understand about how this system actually works. Comfort will always feel like the rational choice in the moment it is wired to feel that way. Your brain will dress it up as wisdom, as work-life balance, as knowing your worth. But underneath those stories, the mechanism of replaceability is either accelerating or reversing nothing else. The moment you decide to grow again is the moment you stop being interchangeable. Not because you became more skilled overnight, but because you rejoin the group of people moving forward. And in every organization on Earth, that is the only group that gets to decide what happens next.